Hey there, folks. My name is Maisha. I'm a mom and a doula, breastfeeding counselor, home birth assistant, maternal health advocate, childbirth educator, and more, living and practicing in NYC and surrounding areas. Today's very special guest is a friend and colleague, Chloe Campbell, who is a home birth midwife who's also living and practicing in NYC. I'm so excited to share this interview with you.
Hi. Good to see you.
Just,
Is this the Zoom? You're recording a podcast from Zoom?
yeah,
Cool. When did you start doing this?
a year ago. Yeah.
What's it been like? Has it been like hard to stay on top of doing it, or you like it? It like gives itself life.
So I don't do it all the time. And, you know, they say you're supposed to put out content all the time. That's the thing.
Yeah.
But I also feel like the thing is different for each human being. Like, what's the thing for you doing the thing, right? Whatever you're doing. And I
Mhm.
also don't want to talk if I don't have anything profound to say.
Right.
I could talk every day and it'd be yeah, yeah, yeah. But you also don't know what things will hit, right?
Exactly.
But I'm not surprised which things have hit on mine. So my most popular video is I helped a mom who was having trouble with her latch. It was very painful. She contacted me online. We hadn't met in person, and I said, "I'll fix your latch online, record it." So
So smart.
having not met, I fixed the latch on Zoom.
Great.
That's a popular one.
That's really cool. And actually, there's great research, and I'm sure you're familiar with it, that when you correct someone's latch hands off, they remember how to do it better. And it's
Mhm.
like I really work on that when I'm working with lactation.
Right.
But it's just so easy to be like, you know?
Interesting.
Um,
Yes, I remember I heard in the last few years that the mom said in, research surveys they prefer hands off, right?
yeah.
I think it depends on the person. And I bet a lot of those surveys were happening in hospitals where the person just came in and grabbed a boob without
Yeah.
the right energy for it. Because then I felt terrible. I was like, I grab boobs a lot. So then I like called some of my past clients, like, was that okay? Like, no, it was great. It's different. I was at their home, I was at their birth. They're like, girl, grab this boob and get to work. Like, let's
Yeah.
go. We're
That's a really good point. I hadn't thought about
right. Like
that.
if a nurse just comes in and hasn't really built a rapport with you and you don't know her and you didn't pick her,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Like they all picked me. So it's a
Yeah.
completely different dynamic, right?
Mhm.
But
Mhm.
it's different hands on, hands off.
Yeah.
I think for me, what's bad when I do it hands on, because I've been doing it 26 years, I do it too fast and easy.
Mhm.
I'm like, they're like, what?
What was that? What just happened? I blinked and missed it. Yeah.
Like, what? I'm like, don't feel bad. Like, this is your first time. This is my 20,000th time. I'm really good at it, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Not your first rodeo.
Yeah, no, 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 no.
Is it okay if I eat chocolate
Yeah,
wine?
eat, and I have a drink too.
Okay, good, good,
So
good.
please start with a quick intro, name, place, job, why are we here? Go ahead.
Okay. So my name is Chloe Campbell. I am a home birth midwife. I've been practicing in New York City for 5 years, and I was a birth worker for 10 years before that. So I've been on call more or less 15 years nonstop.
Right?
Yeah,
Right? Crazy.
it's crazy.
All right. Do you hear the cat?
No,
Okay, cool. A lot of folks that she meows, she's the most talkative thing. She's just meowing nonstop.
she's the real host of the podcast.
Yeah. So I want to start with, because I'm really interested. We were at that birth not too long ago, and you started telling me about back home in Ireland. I was like, oh, I don't know this about you. I want to hear more. So I want to know more about where you're from, where you grew up, and what it was like being there, and what brought you here.
Oh, good question. I mean, so where I'm from in Ireland is technically Northern Ireland. So it's the top northeast six counties. Britain wouldn't let them go. When the whole of Ireland, Britain took it and had it as theirs, surprise, surprise, in up till 1921. And then there was like a freedom, like a revolution to push for Irish autonomy. And the UK said, okay, we'll give you most of Ireland back, but we're going to keep the most profitable part with the shipyards. Um, and also in the north, there were more Protestants. So there
Mm-hmm.
were more people who identified themselves as being British because the British put them there to keep Ireland, as their power play.
Mm.
So I'm from Northern Ireland, and I preface that because I feel like if I don't say that, I'm appropriating a Southern Irish identity. Yeah, I grew up just outside Belfast, and it was like Derry Girls tapped into my childhood. My teenage years, I was a teen the same age they were. Did you watch Derry Girls?
I did, yeah.
Did you understand when they were talking what they were saying?
Yeah,
You were
yeah,
the
yeah, yeah, I did.
subtitles.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I was watching that, and I was having all these moments like, how are they in my brain? How are they? This looks like my school uniform. This looks like my school. And then it was my school. It was filmed in my school. And they did this dance, like a talent show that was like the Spice Girls, Who Do You Think You Are? Which I did on that stage with my friends. So that's a very good piece of media that contextualizes my origin story.
How old were you when you came here?
I came here when I was 20, and I went to London after. I went to London for university and came over to New York for an exchange year as part of my university. I had been here this summer before. I was originally going to go to Australia for that exchange year, but I came here this summer before and just like loved the city so much.
Mm-hmm.
Mind blown. And
So so tell me what that's like to come to New York for the first time at 20 as someone who was here since they were born. Like, how is
yeah, I mean, I loved the serendipity and spontaneity of being able to get around a place on a subway and stay out late at night and not have to rely on like cars, and also the plurality of the culture and how everybody was accepted. And at that time, Sex in the City was like a big deal. So it felt like I had landed on the set of that in my
that?
own little like realm. Um, and I worked at a youth hostel in exchange for free accommodation. So I shared a room with like eight other people, four sets of small room, four
Mm-hmm.
sets of bunk beds. People like travelers from all over. So, and I kind of liked it for the company. There was always
Yeah.
somebody around.
Yeah.
I cannot imagine doing that now, but it was,
Oh,
I, ca- I, I don't know how it was ridiculous. We were all
right.
going to get adults in bunk beds, but
Right.
um, yeah, it was like a really, when I think back, it was really good fun and carefree.
What year is that? Like,
2005, 2006. And
okay.
that's when I met my husband here.
Mhm.
So my exchange year was to NYU, and I got to pay my home university fees in London, which is like £1,000 for tuition for the year. And somebody here paid their tuition for NYU for the year. And I got to just be there and float around. And my university campus in London was very small and contained, and it was a big art school. So everybody, the village around it was kind of had a couple of pubs, but it was quiet. So there was more cohesiveness to the student
Mhm.
body. And here the student body was diffused.
Right.
And I found that I didn't relate to people my own age here. Like they
Hmm.
were talking about Hillary Duff. I was like, that's for 13-year-olds. Like the NYU student body was not at all like the student body in London. And like it was so easy to get good grades on paper. Like the papers I wrote for NYU would have been like ripped to shreds by the people I hadn't like, because I didn't wasn't referencing the right way, the academic way, and the for. So I, instead of really being, because it was so diffused into the city, the culture, all my friends and my social life wasn't anything to do with NYU that time, and that's how I met my husband. He was a
So,
bartender.
oh, okay, cool. Which bar?
This bar called May Bar in Koreatown. It was on the top of La Quinta Hotel, and it was like right under the Empire State Building.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. So I
So,
met there. We were like long, no, we were, I was here for a year. Then we did long distance for a year. And then I got pregnant and had a baby. Decided to do that here.
wow. And is he from here?
He's from Philly. So he's very much like East Coast.
Yeah,
He came here, must have been in his late 20s when he came here. We met a couple of years after that.
right.
Yeah.
So then you got pregnant and then you gotta choose a provider and a place. I don't really know anything about that birth. So tell me,
Yeah.
how was that?
So we had just done this year-long distance and we were at the Edinburgh Festival. And one of the things about long distance relationship is you don't see each other, then you do, then you
Mm-hmm.
have a whole lot of sex.
Then you get pregnant.
And you get pregnant. It's like when
Yeah.
you're 23, like it's too
Yeah.
easy. It's too
Mm-hmm.
easy. I remember having a conversation with you once, like a long time ago, and you were talking about how someone in your like sex education history as a teenager told you that if you're not trying not to get pregnant, if you're having sex, you're trying to get pregnant. You're
Yep.
trying to get pregnant if you're having sex. You have
Mm-hmm.
to try not to.
Yep.
And if
Yep.
you're doing that, you're trying to.
Yep.
I've told that to my kids, and I know that it
Yes.
comes from you.
Yes.
Yeah. Good
Mm-hmm.
advice. Good advice.
Right.
Yeah. And it just so happened that pregnancy was like at the end of my bachelor's. I had taken a play to the Edinburgh Festival that I had with university that I had written and produced and was feeling kind of disillusioned with theatre. Took
Mm-hmm.
so much effort to get there, all the fundraising that you have to do and like that aspect of producing. And it took me out of the creative process.
Right.
When the play was done, I felt like, oh my God, like I don't, it didn't quite turn out like I thought it would in my head. Like it was the first thing I'd ever done, so it was a really vulnerable process. And I was feeling it at the end, like I wasn't entirely sure what I was going to do next. I was maybe going to come over here for a couple of months,
Mm-hmm.
see what I found, like writing, directing before, like I was going to see that. So the pregnancy came at a window where I was like, maybe I'll just do this. Maybe I'll
Yeah.
do this first.
Yeah.
You just launched into it. It just felt like
Right.
the right thing to do.
Right.
But we weren't based in any one place. We had to decide whether Julian should come to Belfast or I should come here. And for a hot minute, he was like, I'm an Irishman. Like he was gonna come over and do that. And I remember sitting in a coffee shop in Belfast one day, thinking about him coming over as a bartender from America who's a musician that had a pool of people here he was working with to Belfast, which is a small city. And it's fun and it's got like good bones and life about it, but it's like just a fraction of the size and scale of New York. And if you have a high school education, it's hard to get a job that makes a meaningful amount of income. I was sitting in a coffee shop thinking, how many years will we have to work in coffee shops here to get
Mm-hmm.
somewhere?
Yeah.
And I just had this moment of like, I'm just going to go to New York. And then that's what I did.
Okay.
So I got here when I was 3 months pregnant.
And what were you in school for?
At that time, it was drama and theater arts. Yeah.
Okay.
It's
And
interesting the birth workers who have like a creative background, right? They're all around there.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. I was talking with another midwife recently, and she's also got an arts background, and we have trouble keeping our prenatal visits to an hour.
Yeah.
I think because we're into the stories,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
we're I think it comes into midwifery even though it's not like a direct link.
Yeah, I definitely feel like my birth work is like, being an artist too.
Mm. Yeah.
Yeah. And I didn't plan it, but I just have a small apartment. So this painting is a painting that I've been painting for a very long time.
That's really cool. Is it like old school done?
I'm doing a copy. So that's mine, and there is this
Oh,
is
wow.
the real one, and this one is the one that I'm on. So you see, I've gotten a lot
I
done.
am so impressed with
Yeah.
that. It's
Uh,
a really good copy,
I
Maisha.
know, I know. I paint.
Yeah, I see that.
Yeah, I paint. I've been an artist my whole life too, but just as a thing. Yeah, whatever.
Wow.
Mhm.
Amazing.
So yeah, it feels like part of it in
Hmm.
some way, right?
Totally. And the conversations you get into and like character studies, I guess, like what's going on for people, how they're processing it, that part of life.
The way we go in. There's no exactness too, like with art, right? There isn't anything exact.
Yes.
It's just evolving and
And it's different every time. And
yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
And there's not one answer, right?
Mhm. Exactly. They're open-ended questions, which
Yeah.
is more like the arts than
Yeah.
the sciences. Of course, science plays a role, but yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So where did you choose to give birth and how did that go?
Echo. So I really naively just like toddled along to the closest clinic that I found. I called them. I was like, "Can you help me?" They said yes.
Mm-hmm.
And it was on like Division Avenue in Williamsburg.
Mm-hmm.
Wasn't even the closest actually. We lived in Calgary. I don't know why I landed there, but I rolled through. And I talked to a social worker and a doctor there, and they were great in that they set me up with PCAP, which was I was
Right.
an
I
undocumented
haven't even
immigrant.
heard that word in so long. Yeah.
I know, right? It's like Medicaid's restructured.
Huh?
I was like I did like I came here like we got married and we got married before my visa expired. Like I was never illegally here because that's harder to unravel than it is to stay on the side of the law that they want you to be on. Came here, got married, did the paperwork for a green card over a year. Julian was, but he didn't have insurance. Um, so that all came, they did that for me. And I guess I haven't really thought of that for a long time, how helpful that was. It was good that I got that from them. And
Mm-hmm.
then I went in for a prenatal visit around like 21 weeks or so. And the nurse came out to the waiting room and was like, Campbell, where have you been? There's something wrong with your baby. Spoiler alert, there was nothing wrong. Or at least
Mm-hmm.
nothing they could see at the sono at that time. But they had picked up what's called an echogenic focus on the heart structure, which tends to mean not much at all, but can be associated with some trisomies. And
Mm-hmm.
they hadn't done the quadratic screen, right? Not the NIPT, this quadratic
Mm-hmm.
screen to rule out Down syndrome. So they were mad with me that that wasn't documented because
Mm-hmm.
then they'd be in trouble.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And I was just, I went to the waiting room and start crying.
Oh.
And she said, "Why are you crying?" And we did the blood work. I was like, take all the blood, take all the blood you want. It was like 21, 22 weeks. I was 23 years old and I could like, the idea of a pregnancy sounded great. The idea of a pregnancy with a problem, didn't think about that.
Yeah.
Um, and it turned out, of course, everything was all right, but it was a real wake-up call to what kind of care and engagement I was going to have with the people that were providing care.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I needed that. And also, the business of being born was out literally that week at the IFC. It was January 2007. And I saw an ad for it in the Village Voice. And it was like, Julian, we're having a baby. Maybe we should go to this. And it just, I didn't realize at the time that I was someone that wanted a home birth until I saw that. I was like, I wanted a natural unmedicated birth at Brooklyn Hospital in 2007.
That's so funny.
So scary. So And the type of labor that I had, I wouldn't have got that
Mm-hmm.
because it was like 36-ish hours. It was fine, it progressed. But I
Mm-hmm.
probably would have gone in early.
Yeah.
Probably, I don't know. I don't know if I would have got the epidural. I did ask for a C-section at one point at home. Didn't cut, wasn't like a grief
Uh-huh.
hoping laborer. I was pissed.
Yeah.
So I think I would have gone in early, probably got pit and probably got an epidural. And then who knows what from there, right? Because you add that to the mix, then what does the baby do? And what?
Mm-hmm.
So I found Kristen Leonard.
Oh, I love her.
Yeah. And she was so great. And the contrast between the nature of care she was providing and what I was receiving at the clinic on Division Avenue in Williamsburg was stark and sharp. And like my mind was really blown because I could see what was going on here and care for what it was in a way that I couldn't before. And I got really interested and engaged with birth, was reading all about it leading up to it, and I just kept reading. I just kept reading the year that followed. And I think in the year that followed, I realized I wasn't going to have the time that I would have wanted and needed, free time that I wasn't getting paid to do something theatrical. Like it
Mm-hmm.
just didn't seem like an option, but also my mind was elsewhere too.
Uh-huh.
And I kind of like followed that path of like pursuing midwifery to make a difference in what kind of care was available here.
Right.
Yeah, and I took a doula training. I took a doula training actually to put on a resume for midwifery school or an application, to have some kind of like birth stuff. I didn't think I'd be a doula when I took the training. It was with Natasha Fuchsman. Do you remember her?
Yeah, she was the old director, right? She was like the original doula collective,
Yes.
right? Yeah.
Yeah. So I trained with her and it was a great training. I met Timmery. That's where Timmery, a doula, mutual doula friend of ours, we met there, and Jessie
Mm-hmm.
Chacon now. Um, and then that year, like people just started asking me to be their doula, like
Mm-hmm.
because I met a lot of people who had their first kid when I had mine. So they had second kids, and then it worked out that I could go help them. Then I decided to join the collective, the Doula Collective. We joined at the same time, right? NYC Doula?
I think
Around the same time. But
was
I
it
remember meeting.
in 2010?
Yeah,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
yeah. I remember meeting you at Philip's family practice.
Oh, yeah, yeah. That was great.
Yeah, they did really lovely stuff for their people giving birth there.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting to think of that place in Division Avenue, doing all the wrong things, but they were doing at a hospital setting
It
some
was
good
good.
things. Good things were happening here. And then I started to I was like, oh, I'm actually making some sort of income here,
Mm-hmm.
getting paid $500 for a birth.
It's a lot at first.
Yeah, right. And that was my first like job out of college, you know what I mean? Because I'd come and I have my kids. That was my first job out of college. And the way that the collective was structured at that time is it had this kind of like the more births you did, the more you got paid. And you could, like, for a 25-year-old fresh out of college, like you could generate some income that gave you most of your time with your
Mm-hmm.
small children.
Mm-hmm.
And and then the more births you had, the easier it was to get hired.
Yep. So how long were you there? I forget.
I was in the Doula Collective, let me see, what was it, 2010 to 2016 or 17 when I started midwifery school.
I think I probably left about that time too.
That was the best time.
We were definitely they were the best time. I guess I should explain what is it. Do you want to explain what is the New York City Doula Collective?
So at the time it was formed was around the time that Carriage House was formed too.
Yeah.
And it was like these organizations that were brought together by more experienced doulas
Mhm.
to mentor newer doulas and also give them referrals because they were getting to price points that they couldn't provide care to all the people that were getting because being a doula was blowing up. It was
Yep.
blowing up. It was like a building industry, and with
Hmm.
like more and more people could see the value of it. There was research coming out that showed the value of it too. So it was a structure where you'd get experience, and you had to, the doula collective in particular, like you had to show up for the meetings,
Yeah.
which I think was good. Like it,
It's
because
great.
it's so easy not to show up for stuff like that. Yeah.
That's where you would learn so much, because meeting with 20, 30 doulas every month, listening to all these, stories, so you don't have to learn every single thing yourself, right?
Exactly. And the richness of just listening and thinking about birth and,
Hmm.
you know,
You
all.
also need someone else to talk to because you can't talk to anyone. And when you're new, like I remember when I was new, I had to like debrief after every birth.
Yeah, definitely.
And now I don't.
Right. That's so true.
Here and there, if it's a lot, but not all the time. Now,
Right.
like, how was the birth? Good.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's like, well, then, and then this happened, and that happened.
Exactly. And like navigating that,
Yeah,
knowing information and but not wanting to cross the boundary of giving
right.
clinical recommendation or getting the
Yeah,
like understanding what that was and honing that
yeah,
role. Yeah.
for sure. Cool. And where did you go to school for midwifery?
SUNY Downstate in Brooklyn. It's close to where I lived. So
That one, because I thought I would do it, and I had tried. It was too much, like too much at the time for me to switch to school because I was homeschooling too, and I had a spouse who traveled, so it was just a little too much.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, right. It's a lot. It's a lot to take that on the master's program.
Oh, yeah. That was too much. I was like, I can't do this.
Do you ever rethink like approaching midwifery again, or you feel really good in the
I'm
dual?
fine. I'm fine.
Yeah.
So I remember I was at a home birth where the midwifery student caught for the very first time, right?
Mhm.
And the student, the midwife both caught, the baby and whatever. And the midwife said to the student midwife, "Do you feel that?" She's like, "I feel that." And I had like this amazing moment. I'm like, oh, am I like missing out on something? Like when you catch a baby, does something like amazing happen? And then I was at a birth early on, mom having baby number two, and I walk in the door and she's just pushing, right? As they sometimes are. I cause she's, and I'm like, oh, we're having it now, right?
Yeah.
So I just get my hands washed. I catch the baby. We call EMS. It's all fine. I was like, yeah, I don't feel. I mean, it's great, but I didn't feel
Mhm.
like that's the thing I have to do.
Yeah.
So, okay.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I've since caught now three. It's cool. But
Yeah.
oh, what I mean? I have to go back, you know,
Right.
and the one that happened last year, she gave birth home alone, and I talked her through the whole thing, which I feel like I caught too in a way,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, it was all good.
Yeah. Often when they're coming out at a clip, it's all good, you know.
Yeah.
Haven't had,
Right. The ones that come quick are usually fine, except for not. Yeah.
except when it's not.
Yeah. It's like
But
when you're
everything.
having a first, it's usually long. I think it was last year. I had three first-time moms who were like, bam, bam, bam.
Mhm.
Like one of the ones that I talked through on the phone, it was her first. And I hear, I'm like, oh, you're having it now.
Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes that happens. Reach.
Aw,
These things.
so tough, right?
Mm-hmm.
Ah, so tough, so tough, so tough.
Hmm.
Why is it so tough? Because really, we should be able to just give birth to it that way anyway.
I know. And I'm not opposed to it. It's just, it definitely is a risk that you take on at home that makes home birth a whole lot
Hmm.
bigger of a risk. when you do look at the data for poor outcomes at home birth, a lot are associated with breech and VBAC.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's not nothing, you know.
Yeah, yeah,
It
yeah.
works usually.
It works when it that asterisk. I always tell asterisk. Everything I'm gonna tell you, asterisk. Maybe, maybe not.
Right, right. Works unless it doesn't. Yeah.
Usually having a first birth is long, except when it's short.
Yep. Yep.
So home birth, why did you choose home birth versus hospital? Because as some folks don't know, just because you become a certified nurse midwife, you could do hospital births as well.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I knew going into it that home felt like my first language of birth. Um, I always so as a person giving birth, I wanted a home birth. And I remember one of the driving reasons, like when I was in telling them what I wanted for my birth in Williamsburg, I was like, I don't want the baby to be separated from me after the birth. I want them to be with me. And they were like, well, does it really matter if they go to the nursery for a little while? Like you might want to sleep. I'm like, yeah, it really matters. Like that
Mm,
was like a real like the and now that I know more about it, what that feeling was that physiologic sense of normal between the parent and baby, right? When they're out and having that undisturbed, there's so much value in that for everybody. You know, it helps the baby ground and orient themselves to the outside world, you know? Um, yeah, and then you go through, you know, you watch births as a doula, you're in hospital, all different settings, you're in birth centers. I birth assisted with home birth practice for 5 years and saw lots of physiologic birth after physiologic birth, you know, again and again and again, then like hemorrhage, resolution of the hemorrhage, moving
mhm.
on to the next one. And yeah, it's definitely the type of birth that feels most natural to me. And then all of the stuff that you have to watch in a hospital that you don't feel good about, and
Yeah.
you know it's not it.
Mhm.
And I think doulas do great work in making those experiences well supported for people who hospital's the right place for them. I don't think home's the right place for everybody. Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. Um, yeah, and then as I was graduating midwifery school and thinking more about how to start my midwifery career, Kristen and Barry, who were the midwives I assisted with, and Kristen was my midwife, encouraged me to start a home birth practice. In fact, they said they were going to help mentor me through my first home birth practice. And I was like, well, if that's on the table, like what could be the better start to a journey to getting going as a midwife? And there wasn't much of a precedent set for that in the home birth community. Tanya Wills had done it with Marcy and it looked like it was working well for her. Um, and when I think about that time, like April 2019, I was a little back and forth in my head. I was like, maybe I should go get that experience, you know, the numbers and the things in the hospital. And then I was like, well, maybe I'll learn stuff there that I'll then have to unlearn. Maybe it will make me anxious in a way that puts me off home birth.
Right.
And then what? Because in home, and I think a piece of this experience came from me.
Are we saying like if you had done a bunch of hospital births, you would be tainted in a way that you'd prefer to not be, or is that information positive? Like, is it good to
Does
be?
it does it add to the skill set that I want to develop? Really? Does it does it really? I'm sure if I spent time in a hospital, I would have had valuable takeaways. I don't doubt that. But I think it would be quantity over quality. And the same way that we were talking about those doula meetings where we were all just absorbing information, story to story, person to person, is a really human way to learn, right? It's a really like you've taken so much information and remember it so well.
Yep.
It's not like you learn all of the data and statistics and like points and like percentages and having all that organized helps you make the best decision for someone about what they want to do. Actually listening to them and individualizing care does that better.
Like I explained to folks that if you are a care provider in a hospital, you might see 10,000 births, 20,000 births, 30,000 births. You haven't seen a single whole birth. Not a
Mm.
one. Not a one.
Yeah.
So you can have a brand new doula who's been to 10 births, but she's seen 10 whole births.
Mm-hmm.
From, and I don't just mean from the first contraction, but before the birth, because you meet them, you're at their house, you've seen them not having a baby, just pregnant, talking, hopes, fears, right?
Yeah.
To the first, contractions and right, the whole thing, and weeks, months, and years afterwards, right? Because we're still in touch. Like that is such a different lens
Yeah.
of that birth.
Yeah, it really is. And the continuity of care is what we know about doula support, where it really makes a difference in terms of outcomes. APGAR scores. How
Yes.
interesting. Like when you can see somebody and work with them, keep them comfortable and like help support them in their choices. When their babies are born, they're born in better shape. Imagine that.
The big picture, right? Like, people will send me texts like, who was ever trying to nurse and they ask me a question. I'm like, I can't answer it. I have to see the whole person.
Mhm.
Like someone say, oh, someone's engorged. Should she hand express? I'm like, you gotta put her on the phone with me. You know
Yeah,
what I mean? Like I can't just say hand express this or that. I'm like, one, how do we know she's engorged? How old is the baby? Like, no, I need a solid 1 to 3 hours to tell you whether or not she should hand express.
yeah.
Right. So when you just see clips of birth, you're seeing clips of birth, right?
Mhm.
And not the whole context of where we were and where we are now.
Yeah.
Right. And the stuff that I've learned of with like the hindsight of when I had a bad outcome. Now I know.
Mhm.
Right. Whereas if I would just come in at the end when we're having an adverse thing, I didn't know that 20 hours earlier there was a sign.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, the complete picture, the whole thing, the picture, not the big picture that the numbers tell you,
Yeah.
or the small picture that the labs tell you, but the actual person right in front of you, you know. And so I wanted to learn about birth that way, like
Yeah.
the next one. And actually, when I thought about it, I didn't want to see everything. I don't, there's stuff about birth. I don't want to see some things about. I hope I never see some things. I don't need an exhaustive repertoire of everything that could go wrong. And I think if I had one, I might not be better for it.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, that was the kind of like headspace that I was bringing into getting started.
It definitely does affect you, like, because I worked with the Department of Health for so long. I got people who are extremely high risk. So I would say I now, as a provider, as a doula, am a more conservative provider because I've seen so much poop hit so many fans,
Yeah,
right? That I'm just like,
right.
let's just reel it in. I still trust births. I still do home births, but I had years where everyone had preeclampsia. So
Mhm.
like I'm just more nervous.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And preeclampsia and things like that are real things that are
Yeah,
scary.
yeah,
Like where we get into big problems with them is when they go kind of untreated or dismissed,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
Tricky.
yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So yeah, I've had, and you know how it's how they all clump, like there's patterns.
Yes.
I had a uterine rupture and a placental abruption back to back in the same
Oh,
hospital.
with different people, like
Well, different clients. Was it the same care provider? I don't remember.
wow. So too, it's not like the abruption because abruptions can simultaneously come up with VBAC, right? If you
No, so
rupture,
the abruption, that was her first, you know?
it was a first birth.
Yeah, it was her first birth.
Not fun.
No, but being experienced helped because so it was her first. She was home. Contractions aren't that bad yet, but her bleeding was a lot, and I was like, oh no, not a good sign. She's like, I'm fine. I'm like, no, get your ass in the car. And she was there with her friend. Her friend was like, I told her to go to the hospital. I'm like, no, we have to go now. I
Mhm.
like dragged her out, and we got there, and the nurse came back to me. She says, you got here just in time.
Oh. So there you go. There you have it. Like physiologic birth, not augmented with a bunch of pip.
No, that was just home. That was just home, and I just saw it.
Karen Strange's NRP is so great for this. I
Mhm.
think that that was such a good, it's such a simple reason.
Love her class.
I love it. Like you've never heard anything about, never had any clinical training. You haven't thought at all about how to breathe for a baby before. You walk out of that and you're like, the baby's born in the subway. I got it. I
Yep.
got it. But she talks about how when she does debriefing with people of bad outcomes, and she'll be like, birth is normal most of the time. It's a ship that writes itself, like you're good. But when you start adding risk factors, like if someone's only risk factor is their water's been broken for 48 hours and they're not in labor yet.
Mhm.
And that's it. They don't have IVF.
Right.
They don't have
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
they don't have gestational diabetes. You have that one thing.
Yeah.
It's gonna be all right. If
Yeah.
you overlap that with GBS positive,
Yeah.
meconium in the fluids,
Mm-hmm.
along like if you start to put cards on top of each other, by the time you get to four, you're probably 80% of the way to a problem.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean it tracks. Yeah, you know, in and of itself, a long labor is probably fine with a baby that sounds good.
Yeah.
Probably fine. Probably GBS positive, like treat whatever, probably fine. Not
Right.
ruptured,
Totally
probably
fine.
fine. Put them all together.
Add these things. You add these things,
Yeah.
it gets tricky. So for home birth, I feel like there's three main things that people fear and or misunderstand or don't get. And I feel like it's staying safe, the pain, and cleaning up.
Yeah, you're right. You're right.
Right? So I
Yeah.
want like to get into those with you as far as like staying safe. Like, how do you explain that to folks? I want people to know that it is safe and how is it safe?
Yeah. Well, oh, I'm trying to pick a good starting place.
Right?
I guess the prenatal care is really the starting place for that because you're monitoring for problems.
Right.
And not every problem is instantly a factor that makes home birth unsafe. For example, somebody tests positive for gestational diabetes, but does really well keeping their blood sugar in control for pregnancy. Growth is normal, blood pressure is normal. One thing we don't
Mm,
see this a lot.
right, right.
But sometimes, like if somebody's blood pressure is truly like trending upward into a range where it's outside of my ability to effectively respond at home, like just identifying candidates for like AP transfers, I think are part of safety. And they're few and far between, thankfully, but
Mhm.
that's one component. Then in labor, the monitoring that happens as like in my role as a midwife for safety are essentially the parents' vital signs, like their blood pressure, their temperature, like those things, that's part of it. And the baby and how their heart rate responds to contractions. More so in when labor is active, when contractions are in a pattern that are really kind of like rolling. You want information on their response to that. Um, and then having equipment and a setup for common obstetric issues that are almost variations of normal, that come up for some people, like hemorrhages when the placenta releases, bleeding that's too heavy, medications to respond to that are a big part of safety. And in fact, something my friend Robina likes to say is that two major things that improved outcomes for birth were uterotonics, medications for hemorrhages, and antibiotics.
Mm-hmm.
Not sonograms every week.
Yeah.
Not all of the technology,
Right.
continuous fetal monitoring, which happens in a hospital, isn't actually what you should do for low risk people by
Right.
guidelines set by the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists. You should monitor them intermittently because good attentive intermittent monitoring tends to pick up problems that aren't there, but doesn't find problems that aren't. Whereas continuous
Right.
fetal monitoring, yes, it will catch problems that are there, but it will also catch problems that aren't. It's like too much. So what you get with continuous fetal monitoring is a C-section rate that goes up without birth outcomes that improve. That's why we should do it. Less is more. So you really get intermittent monitoring at home in a way that you don't typically get at most hospitals most of the time. Although once I said that on social media, and there's some midwifery practices in hospitals that absolutely do that, and I'm happy that there are,
Do you happen to know like what are the stats, like home birth stats versus hospital stats of,
I
outcome?
happen to know that we don't have the actual stats on that the way other countries do.
Mhm.
In the UK, the NHS tracks all their home birth. They
Mm,
track absolutely all of their home birth. And when they do the numbers and crunch the numbers and look at outcomes, they will tell you that home birth is slightly more dangerous for someone having their first baby in terms of adverse outcomes. And by adverse outcomes, I don't just mean fetal demise, which is the big one that
mm,
everybody in obstetric care cares a lot about. But
mhm,
they track as well birth injury to the baby, um, parental morbidity and mortality, injury to the parent, like they track a lot of metrics on that, not just demise. And they say your first baby, the safest setting by the data, big data with the big net that they cast is with a midwife in a hospital-based birth center. Your second baby in the UK, the odds are the same. It's not riskier. It's not
mhm,
riskier at home in the hospital. You're same risk. But in home, both cases, you're likely to have less intervention by virtue of the location. Here we have some data from state to state. So this like hodgepodge of like stuff, like birth certificate data, now delineates here in New York State between a planned home birth and an unplanned home birth. And all across the state, all across the country, we see actually there is more risk for home birth than there's not. Than in a hospital setting. There's more risk of fetal demise, the one adverse outcome that we track.
mhm,
We're not tracking shoulder dystocia, we're not tracking obstetric complications with as much nuance as other places. There's the MANISTATs, which are Midwives Alliance of North America, which is a self-reporting data collection system that as a home birth midwife you can sign up for. And it's good because it's self-reported. That's its kind of weakness as a data set, but I have to do this. I need to get on my that. You have to register your clients at the beginning of care. You have to say, this is my person that's in my care. And then when Mana knows you have that person, you're accountable for the data. So you can't just omit the information you don't like, which is a big problem with tracking home birth statistics. The home
mhm.
birth midwives in New York State or New York City, we've been working on gathering our statistics to defend ourselves against this. It's like there's aggression towards home birth midwives from other midwives in hospitals here to home births. We've been in kind of difficult situations
Mhm.
recently over the past year with that. So we've been tracking our statistics so that we can say this is the statistics. And when we were like getting together to say how do we count or qualify our clients, people were like, well, if they had a demise before the onset of labor, that shouldn't count as one of our demises. But if they aren't, why are we trying to massage our numbers to make it look like the story we want to tell about home birth?
Yeah.
That's not what good data is about, because these things actually do happen. So we would expect to see some of that happen the way it happens in hospitals in a way that's not entirely preventable because it's a force of nature and it works in its own terms. So that's just to give you like there's difficulty collecting accurate data because it all has to be self-reported. And then who crunches the numbers? And what happens if someone doesn't submit their statistics on time or that kind of thing? So we have complexity in understanding that here. And we also have a much fractured much more fractured system of care. So one a scenario in which an adverse outcome could be cultivated or generated could be less to do with whether something was preventable and more to do if EMT are going to come in, listen to what you're telling them, not think that you're just some kind of like
Mm-hmm.
wingnut who's just like a pleb in the street, not understand anything about licensure or midwifery training or
Yes.
planned home birth or any of this. So you get into this battle of like, this is a problem, take me seriously. And they're like putting an oxygen mask on a baby
Oh my
that should
God.
be breathed for.
Yes.
And they're not making you, you know, if you've probably taken CPR classes
Yeah.
and they tell you it's so boring, right? But they always drive home. They're like, appoint a team leader. And then the team leader tells everybody else what to
Yes.
do. The team leader for transfers to the hospital should be me. Please,
Yes.
let's not fight. Let's not. And then the more that happens, you know, sometimes I've rarely called EMT. One time I called them for a baby that was really involved resuscitation, and I was breathing for the baby. And the minute before they got there, the baby breathed for itself.
Mm-hmm.
Now they're there.
Mm-hmm.
And the baby arguably probably should be monitored in a hospital, but they're not listening. They want to put an oxygen mask on a baby that's breathing without the right equipment to get the right level of oxygen.
Right.
Shouldn't just give a baby tons of that's not good for them.
Not good.
Definitely not.
Have an SPO2 on them to really see where things
Yes.
are.
And I did have an SPO2 and it was 99%. So don't
Right.
give. So then they're
Right.
looking at me like I'm the one telling them the wrong thing and not the other way around. And now there's tension. Now
Right.
it's like head to head. Now they're taking the baby and they're taking it. Now I have a bigger problem. So the next time maybe I have a baby that I'm like only gonna call EMT for them if I really
Right.
worried about it. So we get this kind of distance happening and these fractures in the articulations of care. And I think those are the things that make home birth here less safe. Because then we get into the lane of I can just like I have 3 problems on the table now, but I think I can just get through this at home because if we go in now,
Yes.
it's going to be harder in all of these ways. Or they'll put this baby in the NICU and maybe it doesn't need to be in the NICU, but it's there for a week. Now what? Now like you start. I think we just inevitably start becoming more maverick than we should be to keep home birth safe.
I see that. Yes. I said that while the transfers are tough.
Mhm. And in the UK, they have a higher transfer rate than we do here because
Because
they have,
I'm okay with it, right?
yeah, yeah, because your midwife can go, because it's nice because EMT come and they all work together. You can have the same midwife in the hospital, you're in the same team. You can, I did a clinical rotation in the UK as part of my downstate program, and I was going round with a home birth midwife to her prenatal visits. And we were with a family that were planning a VBAC. It was 38 weeks. And you can plan a VBAC at home within the NHS. And the mom's like, I'm getting excited. I have all my stuff, but part of me doesn't, I'm not sure I want to be at home.
Mm-hmm.
And the midwife was like, well, you can tell me the day of and we'll just go.
Wow. Right. 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 Mm-hmm.
And then she's like, but I do really want all these things. She didn't have to decide until she was in labor.
Right.
Here,
Right.
you've got to know.
Yeah. 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 I've had great home birth transfers. I've had weird home birth transfers. Yeah. If it's great, it's great.
Yeah. Yeah. And we're not, you know, with all the problems that are here, there's other countries where there's even other states where they're much worse off.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like I did a transfer this week and it was for pain management. And we were going to go to the closest hospital, but they were really busy. And then we called a hospital that was like slightly further away, but had rooms of it. They had nobody there. We were like, we want an epidural quickly. That's the move. We walked out of their door at like 10 p.m. At 11 p.m., they had an epidural in place.
Nice.
So good. Exactly what they wanted for their process. And that particular epidural worked exactly what you would hope it would work.
Yeah.
Got some sleep, had a baby in the morning.
Yeah.
I was so grateful. The resident medical resident there was lovely. Like the reason the epidural happened so fast was she had everybody ready to do it by the time we got there. What a dream. Like she really cared. She really listened to me. She was interested. She knew what home birth was.
Mhm.
But it can work so beautifully. But then if we end up transferring when we push some, we're often doing things at home that hospitals wouldn't tolerate.
Yeah.
Like maybe someone's water has been broken for 3 days,
All the time. Yeah.
a long time. And there is a data set that looks at the risk of infection when your water is broken. And at 24 hours, the risk of infection is about 1%. And at 96 hours, the risk of infection for the baby is 2.4%. I might want to take on that risk.
Right.
And I'll probably be in labor
Hmm.
by the time the 96th hour rolls around. And no
Right.
vaginal exam. I think if there's a data set that gives some kind of idea of what the risk is, beyond 96 hours, I don't know if all of a sudden the risk is 10% or 20. Like I don't want to go that deep into waiting, but I think there is more space to wait if someone really wants to.
Right.
And we give them generally, like you water breaks, you're in a hospital practice, you're right there within 12 to 24 hours getting induced.
I just found out from my mom that I was prom, and I didn't even know I was prom.
You did that.
She said she bought the tub for me. She's pregnant. She's walking down the street and her bag broke.
Mm. She had that, like in the movies.
Like in movies, but not having any pains. She wasn't having, and she was like 2 days. I'm like, and like they didn't call. She's like, I didn't call anybody. Me and your dad just stayed home until things started happening, and then we went in. They didn't
Wow.
tell anybody. They didn't. She's like, I didn't know you were supposed to tell anybody. I wasn't having any pain.
Uh-huh.
I was like, oh wow. Like now they'd be like, ah. I'm like, 2 days, okay.
Yeah. Without reducing the risk of infection as much as possible, no vaginal
Right.
exam
Oh,
at home. Like you are the odds are and like a normal term baby with
and
an
healthy and very young and
other risk factors. That's
none. Yeah.
probably okay.
Yeah.
That's and if somebody thinks about the risk and they want to take it on, then they should have that option.
She said she didn't even think about it. She
Uh,
didn't know she was doing anything differently or, she knew you don't go if you're not having any contractions. She didn't think anything of it that her back broke.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Yeah. So I mean, coming back to after I graduated midwifery school, I did work in the Brooklyn Birth Center for about a year in like 2020, the beginning of COVID. And the skill I was happiest to get there was IVs.
Yeah, yeah.
I really wanted to be able to be confident in nailing that because when you need it, in the case of a
Yeah,
hemorrhage,
yeah,
it
yeah, I did it.
makes make or break.
Yes, yes.
So confident when an IV is in place and you can just take care of somebody.
Yeah.
So that it wasn't anything but that that I felt. I mean, there was all of the little cases. I got to do a lot of out of hospital birth. When I was there were really fun people there. Tanisha was directing it, and she was a great director. She worked way too hard.
Mhm.
Shauna King was there. Who else? Why am I blanking? Sakina. Every time
Mhm.
Sakina walked through the door of the birth center, 4 people in labor walked in right behind her. Like we'd be like room to room to room. But it was really nice to be around those people for a while and like learn from them and with a population that wanted out of hospital, had their mind in gear for out of hospital.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, but I mean, I wonder if I had been in a hospital, if I would have just got into the habit of like having a low risk threshold with prom, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Or like resuscitating babies. Like if you're the provider and you're there and a baby needs you, you go. You don't. I didn't want the feeling of like someone's gonna come in now and save me from this. I didn't want that.
Right, right.
I'd have to get over that. Yeah.
I've seen a lot of, well, not a lot, but enough resuscitations at home. But it was after I took Karen Strange's training that I could understand what was still okay as bad as it looked.
Mhm.
Like one, her baby didn't breathe. It was a 12-minute going on 13-minute.
Um,
Very long for anyone who can't imagine. But we had the cord attached and the color was fine. Tone was 0,
mhm.
respiration 0 because the cord was attached. So I understood that it's not the worst thing right now. The cord is still pulsing. The baby still has good color. The
Mhm.
baby was totally fine. You
Yeah,
get what I mean? Because that was our bridge to keep the baby oxygenated until they transitioned to air.
yeah.
So I didn't die myself I was
That,
stressed, right? I was definitely stressed,
mm,
but not it's over, you know. And I didn't do the resuscitation on that one, but because she had her
mhm,
assistant there, so the two of them. But I remembered from Karen Strange to talk to them. So I'm
mhm.
telling the parents, talk to your baby, talk to your baby. The mom was just quietly kind of stunned, just staring at this because it's attached. So it's right in her face. And I'm like, call your baby, call your baby. When she finally opened her mouth, his eyes rolled and we knew, oh yeah, he's here. And then he started
Yeah.
to come to. So I felt, from her training, it helped me help, even though I was hands off.
Mhm,
Like,
mhm.
talk to your baby, talk to your baby. And he's fine. And
Yeah,
did transfer to the hospital, and that was a very smooth one, just to, because that was a lot,
right.
right?
That's a baby that would benefit from observation.
Yeah,
Probably isn't going to
right,
have a seizure,
right.
but you want to be in the right
Yeah.
place.
So and when we got to the hospital, they're like, we're gonna take, like, yeah, go. We're like, take him, right?
Yeah.
Because that was a lot. And also remember, it was so hot. It was like July. The air conditioning was not good. And all of us were just so happy to be in like air conditioning.
Yeah.
We're
That
like,
it
take the
wasn't
baby.
traumatic. Yeah.
Yeah. We're like, take the baby. We're just gonna sit here and like thaw from that ridiculous heat.
Yeah. I mean, the resuscitation procedures and protocols really work very well.
Yeah, they really do.
I went to um, Eswatini in South Africa last November because a really good friend was having a baby. And for years, we talked about me being her midwife and doing that birth at home. And we did it, and it was amazing. But totally different scene. We were 40 minutes away from the hospital. There is no ambulance.
Mm-hmm.
We had a birth assistant slash doula that was a friend of my friend that she was just like, that person feels like the right person to do this. And I was like, well, I need an extra set of hands, so I better
Yeah.
show them my stuff. And the one thing that we talked about with resuscitation, I was like, if you see me working to breathe for the baby, dry their face and help me get the seal. If you
Right.
don't remember anything else, that's what I need your hands for. And then if I'm breathing for the baby, just put your hands on the baby's head and tell its soul to get back in its body. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's actually what you're doing.
Yes.
That's what you're doing. Yeah, yeah, I can think in the bigger resuscitations I've had, there've been moments exactly like you described.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah,
But
and then he was back, and then he was back.
and
Uh,
to have that experience as someone who's just been born, in which you're still regarded as a human being having a human experience, helps soften the blow of whatever you just had to do to get here.
mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Whereas if you're removed, cut from the
Oh,
cord,
that,
you're
yeah,
taken, of course, how could you not disassociate?
right.
Truth. Oh, like, how could you get in your body? Now, of course, there's some babies that need more.
Yes, we have to
I'm
do that.
not saying there aren't. Sometimes I'm sure people in hospital settings have done all that stuff and not been successful in helping a baby get back in its body, even though they did all the right stuff because the baby needed it. But the resuscitations that I've had, I'm glad the babies were where they were and the families were where they were.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
like remember when I was a kid and I'd be in the store with my mom and I would go off on my own and I would hear her cough and I could hone in on her. Like,
Yeah,
mom.
right. Right, exactly. You're hardwired really to do
Yeah.
that. You know
Yeah.
those voices.
I'd be like, I know where she is now. There she is,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So pain because at a home birth, there's no epidural. And I remember when I was pregnant again and planning my home birth, and I was talking to my home birth midwives. I'm like, is there something else, for pain? Like, is there some herb or something? And they're like, honey, no. I mean, there is some stuff, but not like an epidural. They're like, are you sure you really want to have a home birth? Because you don't have to, right?
Yeah.
No, I just wish there was, I was like really wanted an out because I knew
Right.
how much it would hurt. Like, is there something? They're like, no,
Yeah.
there's not. So a lot of folks ask me who don't know, why would you do that to yourself? Like, why would you go through the pain of childbirth when you don't have to?
Mhm. I feel like some people are really clear that they don't want to
Mm-hmm.
plan an epidural for that reason, and it's valid.
Yes.
So, like we talked about an epidural, and I'm so grateful that those exist for people here if they need them. My friend in Africa could only get one if she wanted a C-section because
Mm-hmm.
the anesthesiologist isn't on staff. And if they bring him in, he's coming in for a surgery. He's not coming in to babysit someone. So, so good that we have them. But many people who are drawn to or called to home birth want to be here because they want to be in that rite of passage that it is and to work through it and to have the benefits of physiologic birth. Because even though epidurals are great, they are not without risk. Sometimes they don't work well. Sometimes they drop your blood pressure. Sometimes they affect the placental bed and the baby's heart rate. They're not nothing. They're not nothing to do. They carry risks and um yeah, being in a home setting. One of the other things I feel is part of the safety net is physiologic birth checks and balances itself to some extent.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So maybe somebody in a long labor with spaced out contractions, their body and baby know that that works really well for them.
Mm-hmm.
That there's recovery for the baby in between. They get better oxygenated. That it's a more gentle process.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas maybe in a hospital setting, that would be labeled as a failure to progress, and
Mm-hmm.
Pitocin would be added. And now, if the Pitocin's added, is that going to stress the
Mm-hmm.
baby? Maybe, maybe not. But the safeguarding the physiologic birth in a home setting, having your creature comforts around you, can you remove the physical experience? No. Can you ameliorate it with comfort tools? Yes. Can you get beyond a place from the impossibility and pain into the inevitability that you're going to get it done and shift your consciousness and perceive pain differently? Totally. A lot of people do. I mean, sometimes hypnobirthing works. Sometimes hypnobirthing gets people mileage.
Yeah.
I think I've only seen it work truly 3 or 4 times. And
Me
I've
too.
also seen 3 or 4 labors in which people really weren't in pain and they weren't practicing hypnobirthing. Maybe they're just wired that way,
Yep. Yep.
you
I've
know?
had I've had a few births where it was painful, but not like it is for the majority of folks. Like really not that bad. It was bad, but not that bad. I don't know why.
Yeah. Maybe it's to do with how people are innervated, and maybe the body keeps the score and they're figuring out something that's in their life experience through their birth, which is another reason people come to birth, right? To like make that come to home birth, make to feel their feelings, to feel the feelings, the physical feelings. And yeah. Yeah. And I mean, yeah, there's the coping, like TENS units. A good doula is totally got pain relief tools in the bag or coping skills that translate to pain relief. Um, the tub that can help, the shower can help position. There's stuff that can be done to be supportive. And as well, sometimes when a person can feel what's going on in their body, they choose a position that facilitates
Right.
progress that you don't get with an epidural, the movement, the ability to move and work with your process.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I've had very few transfers to the hospital for pain relief, but when they come up and they happen, if somebody, when they're in a moment in their birth that they're like, I don't know if I can do this anymore, again and again and again. And you're like, is this them? Is that really where they are? Or they're just they're just trying to find a way to cope. Many people, if you say, do you really want to leave your home right now and go to the hospital, will be like, no, not really.
Yeah.
Like the idea of going and doing that sounds worse than the
It,
idea of getting through birth at home.
yeah, when I don't know if you remember, but when I had my home birth and I hemorrhaged at home,
I remember that story. Talk
part of
about
what helped me come back was the threat of transfer. And I was thinking about the EMTs coming into my house with their shoes on, those heavy boots. And I had a carpeted apartment. I was like, oh no, oh no. I have to not hemorrhage anymore and not let EMTs come through my apartment. Mm-mm, mm-mm. Nope, nope.
Yep. Yep. So you did it. It's fine.
I was like, oh no, no, no. And be alive because I just had a kid. But yes, that and don't walk with shoes in my house.
Right. Are you open to talking a little bit about what I remember of your story of
Sure,
that?
sure. Yeah.
You were out of your body in the room,
Yeah, I was out. Hmm.
and it felt good.
It's great. Being dead is great. I felt that. Yeah, I think I went
Yeah,
through.
and you were like,
Yeah,
ah,
yeah.
I have to go back in there right now.
Especially after all that pain. I found childbirth painful. I did not have a painless birth at all. Did not have an orgasm. Nope, I did not. Just hurt a lot. So yeah, to go from out all that ridiculous pain to serene bliss. Yeah.
Yeah, not a bad option. Not a
Yeah.
bad option.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was called back. The home birth assistant called me back.
Mm,
She's like, Maisha, you have two boys to live for. And I
well,
didn't get that. I was aware of that. I was like, their life's gonna suck.
but also wasn't it like, but they'll be all right.
Because they're gonna die.
Yeah, because yeah, they'll be here with me at one
Yeah.
point.
Like their life's gonna be horrible. Everyone's gonna feel horrible. My family, the team's gonna feel horrible, but they're all gonna die and see it was fine. But then, but then died in childbirth. So sad, man. You'll be fine. But when she said it, I was like, okay, all right, all right.
I'll come back.
Yeah, I'll come back. It was hard. It was hard to come back. It's something I want to say. It's not that easy to come back,
Mm.
you know?
Like the energetic pull is in the other direction, you mean? Or
It felt like climbing a greased tunnel.
whoa, Maisha, that's so intense.
Like I'm trying to get out and it's greased and there isn't anything. There's like little texture to it, but there's not enough to like get in. It
Do
was
you know how much
really,
blood costs?
I forget a few Ks, at least 1,000, maybe 2,000.
That was more than 1,000. I can tell you right now. That was like 1,500 to 2,000 that got you.
So I forget how many footballs of blood came out, but they were like,
Like your uterus cluttered up with
it was
football.
inside. And I definitely say this is why, so where do I start? Why I'm still here and the great care that I received. So I said, like, everything was fine, or so we thought, because, I was hemorrhaging inside. So there was not a flow
Reach.
outside, right? And all of a sudden I go, I don't feel good. And my midwife does the hunt on me of what is wrong. Like she listened to me as opposed to saying, you just had a baby. She took that flag of what is wrong and hunted, came to my uterus, did the massage, the press, and the big, she's hemorrhaging, right? And they got on it immediately. Because if there was a pause, there was a pause in the care, I may not have, gotten it in time, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Talk about safety, right?
Yeah, I was like, so maybe I would have died in the hospital. I don't know, because I was just like, I don't,
Listen, right, because you couldn't see the blood.
no. I was like, I don't feel good.
Did she have to go in and get the clots?
I don't remember. I just
Maybe
remember,
that's why you left your body. You left at the right time. She
right?
had to go in and get the clots.
I was like, I don't feel good. And then I went back. And then when I sat up again and said, I'm okay, my body didn't come with me. And they're in my face, we're losing her. We're losing her. And I go, I'm okay. And I'm like, oh, my body didn't come with me. And I was fine with me. I was like, oh, my body didn't come with me. Okay. I still just felt like me here saying I'm okay. But then I was like, oh, okay. I'm over there. All right, fine. You know?
Wow.
And then the hanger thing is kind of funny because they hung an IV and they needed a hanger to hang it on like the door. I didn't have any wire hangers because they leave little things in your clothes. So I had specifically thrown them all out. Assistant went in my closet, got one. And afterwards, like, how did she find a wire hanger in my closet? Like, I have none. I was careful to throw them out, but that's the thing, right? And then the assistant had also failed to bring in the adult mask for oxygen. So she was getting her head bit off bad. They only had the small one. So someone just had to hold the tube. People were getting mad. It was fine, it was all fine. Um yeah. So I got pit, I got methogen,
I
probably
bet you
got side attack. I having a blank right now. I'm assuming I got, side attack, oxygen. Oxygen was amazing. Fluids I got.
could you walk to the bathroom and pee afterwards? Mm-mm.
So afterwards, um, I'm flat on my back. To even lift my head, everything would spin.
Mhm.
So I had a little table next to me, a part of filter and pads, like a pile of chucks. I had to just pee on the chucks and well, their dad was supposed to be helping me with this, but part of why we broke up. So I did it myself. I literally just died. I literally died, but I didn't want to wake him up in the night because I knew my toddler was going to be up and I knew I couldn't take care of him. And I didn't want him to be in a bad mood taking care of my toddler. So I did it myself. I just pee on myself and I'm drinking. I said, drink a lot, girl. And I did. Pee on myself, pull the Chucks pad out, slip a new one in, pour myself more to drink, breastfeed. This is
How
what
long were you in bed?
I don't remember, but this is why I do so well in postpartum care. I know what it's like to not have help.
Hmm.
Because like, I don't know how moms do it by themselves. I know it sucks. It's horrible. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah. So, it definitely was a big part of why we broke up after I bore you two sons, died in childbirth, and you still suck. I have to go. You know,
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm not gonna do like if you're still not like the best guy, then if that didn't get you, be like, let me be more
Right. If you
careful.
can have your come to Jesus moment, then when are you ever gonna have it? You're not.
Okay, because that's the most impressive thing I'm gonna ever do.
Yeah.
So that's it.
Right. Right. If you can show up then.
Right, okay. All right, I'm out as soon as I get strong. So 5 months postpartum is when I felt physically strong enough. So it's like I can't leave. I can't even do anything, so but that's like, okay, bye.
Yeah.
Interestingly, when I left him and I came back to New York and my mom met me at the airport, she goes to my son, "How old is he?" I was like, 5 months. She goes, "You were 5 months old when I left your dad." I was like, ooh, ooh.
Yeah.
Interesting, right?
Yeah. But really interesting.
Yeah. Which also, as a care provider, when I see crazy stuff happening, it's not just her cardiovascular system.
Oh, yeah.
It's her life and like her journey, like that for me. I mean, I was healthy and all. Why did that happen? I felt what God was saying, leave this guy, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
so why things happen, right?
Totally.
And have connection with God, because I believed in God prior to that, but we had it hung out like that.
Yeah.
But it gave me so much faith, not faith, like I know you got me. So
Yeah.
I left. And I knew I'd be fine because God has me. I just felt like I knew it. I knew it.
Mhm. Yeah. It's like I think of that story of yours often. Enjoyed hearing like more details on it. Wow, it's huge.
Yeah. So I don't always feel bad when bad things happen because I don't know what the divine plan was there,
Right.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
For them to, I even want to say learn, but like for whatever it is,
Right.
right?
Yeah. Totally. Sometimes it's not going to make sense until after the fact.
Yeah.
Like when you saw 20 hours ago, you were like, that was the flag. You could have,
That was that. That
yeah.
was that. That
Yeah.
was, yeah. So on a clinic, you were talking about the hemorrhage the other day on Reels and the what's compensating, the compensating,
A compensating mechanism. Yeah. So if somebody has a hemorrhage, what will happen is their heart rate will increase to
right?
circulate the blood that they do have faster. And
But
at
then you
first,
hemorrhage,
hmm?
but then don't you hemorrhage more?
Yes, so that can be part of it. But and then if you lose enough blood, your blood pressure drops and your heart, if your blood pressure's dropped and your heart rate's up. It's like that sounds so simple now to say out loud, but I had just never thought of the mechanics of that before.
Right.
It was like this really great A&P teacher who like brought to life certain organ systems and how they work and circulation and what you see. Yeah.
Because it made me think, because someone just told me, diabetes is a
Mhm.
heart, blood, and circulatory issue. Everything is cardiovascular. And when I say everything, every complication from her out, not from out in. Like
Yeah.
if she gets an infection, that's from out in. That's
Right.
not right. But from her out, diabetes is cardiovascular, preeclampsia is cardiovascular, hemorrhage is cardiovascular, intrauterine growth restriction is cardiovascular, heart rate dips is her. If
Mhm.
if the baby dips, it's her. Somewhere between her, the placenta, the cord, and them. Like it's all cardio, it's all the blood, it's all the heart, right? Like, can
You're
you think of
right.
any birth complication that's not that?
Shoulder dystocia.
Okay, there you go. There you go. Yes. Yes. That's not that. Correct. Thank you. I was like, is
Although
it?
you could say that, like, I mean, shoulder dystocia isn't always because the baby is too big to fit. It can be how the baby comes in. It can be a
Yeah.
very
Yeah.
mechanical problem.
Yeah. Yeah.
But you could maybe argue that a bigger baby could be a result of cortisol and stress.
Yeah. If they're too big.
Yeah, like if that's the underlying
Right.
issue.
Was it underlying? And
Yeah,
but
or poor blood sugar control,
right, right, right.
perhaps you could loop it back in, but it's quite mechanical, that problem.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. True. True. True.
Yeah, but you're right about the heart. Someone recently was taking care of someone who had gestational diabetes, and we had to do a lot of work to get their blood sugars okay. And they had a history of hemorrhage in their first birth. So we were doing motherwort herbal tincture the last month of pregnancy. And it seemed like that made the biggest dent in the blood sugar. So why we
Mm-hmm.
were doing it. And it's true as well that blood insulin resistance peaks at 32 weeks and it was following a curve that could have, who knows if it's cause and correlation, but it really seemed like it was.
Right, right,
Interesting. Cardiovascular. Yeah.
right. So interesting. So interesting. All right, Mama, those are my questions. What else? Anything else you want to share?
Those are great questions. I really liked talking to you. Wait, the cleanup.
Oh, yeah, I forgot clean up the mess. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, there's chucks pads, right? Absorbent pads that go underneath people to catch amniotic fluid and any blood loss, right?
Mhm.
So those sometimes areas outside of that zone take a hit. Birth tub that you have a liner for is a good catchment area for the birth stuff. But usually any mess that comes along with birth just fits into a garbage bag that gets
Yeah.
taken out after the fact.
And I say we clean it up. We're not going to leave you with a hot mess and an infant.
Yeah, I'm gonna steal that from you. That's a good
Yeah.
way to put it. But it's not that big of a project to get a cleanup like that done.
Let me plug. Oh, yeah, I have one more question. Let me plug this in, which I kind of already know the answer to, but it's such a common question, misunderstood. What if the cord is around the neck? What do you do?
I mean, well, the cord is around the neck 20 to 25% of the time. It's certainly a variation of normal. The screening for problems with the cord is to listen to the baby's heart rate during labor. So it's paying close attention to that, because if the cord's around the neck or around the body and you don't hear the impact that makes on how the baby tolerates their labor, it's not an issue as long as it doesn't hold them up so much that they're not coming out. But then you tend to hear that in the heart, because at a certain point, the body's trying to make them descend. And if the cord is pulling on them and not letting them, their heart rate responds to that, So and actually, clinically, we're taught you can cut the cord on the baby's neck and then to let them out. But of course, none of us like to do that for the value of having the cord attached for all the reasons. But you can like reduce it over their shoulders, you can flip it over their head, or you just leave it and they come out anyway.
Yeah.
That's mostly you leave it and they come out anyway. We're just hyper fixated on it being something we can do in obstetrics.
One more question. Who can have a home birth? Like, what are the health questions you ask for someone who is qualifying or okay to have a home birth?
If they have any underlying conditions that they think might affect their ability to birth safely at home. And I mean, if someone is pre-existing hypertension, it's not necessarily a great candidate, or pre-existing diabetes, anything that's already managed by a specialist. Although hypothyroidism isn't a massive clinical problem, that if people are taking medication for it, it's not really a big risk elevator, you know. And then, it's a little bit like no man's land who's a candidate for home birth out here. Because there aren't many legal limitations on who can and who cannot have a home birth. So it becomes about individualization of care and things. I like people who have IVF pregnancies have more risk factors, and we're monitoring for hypertensive disorders. We're monitoring for gestational diabetes, which they're more at risk of. So if they have risk factors but don't have manifested conditions and the monitoring is green lights, they could still have a home birth, depending on other multifactorial things. So it's hard to say.
Yeah. I was
Uh,
gonna say I see more risk with IVF, but there's such a range of IVF because some people I think didn't really have to have IVF. They just didn't have a care provider who found what the block was,
mhm.
and they probably could have cleared that up and gotten pregnant on their own. And then there's folks that there was a block.
Yeah,
you know, and then that block comes back.
right. And it can blend in with other things like being older, which isn't necessarily in and of itself a risk, but mixed with other things, it can be.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So it's like I think who can have a home birth if somebody can see themselves giving birth at home and like really want to do it, it's worth a conversation with a home birth midwife, you know?
Yeah. Absolutely. Uh, I'll try and make it the last question about what's the word? Environment now. Like, how is home birth right now in NYC? Do you know if everywhere in America right now has it? I don't even know.
No, I think I was just in this conversation the other day. I think it's actually illegal in like North Carolina.
Okay.
I think Alabama potentially too, but I don't want to misspeak. There are definitely some states where it is not legal. And there's also some states that have in their licensing laws things like you are not allowed to go beyond. It's illegal to stay pregnant past 42 weeks. It's
Okay.
illegal to have a
Right.
birth at home. You're breaking the law, not just the rules. New
Hmm.
York State doesn't have things like that.
Right. Right. And that's really tricky because what if your patient refuses to go into the hospital?
Yeah. Yeah, really tricky.
Yeah, I don't want to switch at all. I'm happy, now where I am staying, being a doula, being really independent, being really
Right.
free. Yeah, I'm good. I caught three.
Yeah.
Good. Maybe I'll catch one again. Maybe I won't. It's all good.
Yeah. It's midwifery definitely like adds some stressful layers to supporting birth that weren't there when I was a doula.
Yeah, and well, the times I caught, I didn't feel I felt oh shit. Like
Right. Right.
there was one and I called my aunt. I said, this baby's happening now at home. I don't know what I should do. And she said, well, if the baby comes out crying, it's all good. I'm like, oh, oh.
But I think your instinct to give the baby a breath would have kicked in if you saw that. I think you would have, based
Right,
on your experience, based on the trainings that you've taken.
right, yeah. The third one was big. Yeah, that one was concerning. And and also, so the first two were not my fault. The third one was totally my fault. I should have seen the signs. We had time to get to the hospital. I missed all the signs. That was just me. Part of my distraction was it was my 100th birth. And I was like, going to my 100th birth, thinking about myself. I love birth. It always tells you, right? And I was like, it's my 100th birth. Pay attention to the birth. Pay attention to birth. And then there was a shift. I said, probably time to go soon. You want to sit on the toilet? She was like, sure. And I see a head. Oh shit. Okay. That was but she had all the signs. She had all like her contraction pattern got closer and shorter, and I didn't believe it. I don't know why. I don't know
Because sometimes you believe it and it's lying to you.
why. Because she was quiet. She was just,
Yeah.
and
For
then
a
she
big
breathed a bit
birth,
harder. And then she breathed harder. I'm like, I hope she's 6. I hope we get to the hospital. I hope she's 6 and not like 3.
no matter how well you know it, breaks its own rule, breaks whatever perception you have. It's like, now that's shattered
All right.
next time.
So then I just got there, and then because I had seen like 100 births now, I rocked the baby back and forth.
Mm-hmm.
Head came out, and it was really stuck. So
Wait for the next contraction.
I did wait, but still,
Because in the hospital settings, they want to do delivery the same way they want to just cut the cord because that's what they do.
right, right,
The head's birthed, and then they want the shoulder to come out on the same contraction. So when you see providers in the
right,
hospital doing the head down thing, they're trying to get the shoulder below the.
right, right, right,
But
right,
actually, if you wait till the next contraction, maybe the baby does that itself without
right,
you
and
doing it.
it's
And
fine.
maybe if you do it, you trap the shoulder, and now you've created a
Right,
problem.
and
Now
I
you
meant
have
it. I mean, it's
like
probably great that she was, upright,
totally.
helping, and we got to that. She did tear bad, and the OB was like, such a bad tear. I'm like, well, I don't know, and it's a big baby. But I also like all that hindsight. So afterwards, I realized she did want a home birth.
Mhm,
She wanted a
mhm.
home birth. And I feel like not that she consciously knew how to hide it from me that it was time to go. She's like, I want to time it very, very tight to the hospital.
Yeah, that's the person you like wait, because yeah, you
Yeah.
swear with that picture that you'd get there and hopefully be six or get.
And she was happy. She was totally happy about it. She was thrilled. So yeah. Like, you wanted a home birth. You tricked us all.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, I want to keep talking
I
forever.
know, I have to go. I mean, you could talk more. Tell me more things.
I have a
All
visit coming up in 10 minutes, so I've got to kind of
right.
get back to the day. Yeah, that's where, but I have birth coming up. I better go
Thank
so I
you
can
so
feed.
much. Bye, love. Love you. Bye.
Bye.